As somebody who's done reporting on foreign policy, many incidents that you mention in the book, one is seen at close quarters. And you being a practitioner of foreign policy, as a diplomat, as a politician now, you've seen it at very close quarters. So who did you really have in mind while writing the book? Because when I read it, I felt it's anybody can get lessons from that, not just journalists, not just people in think tanks, but who did you have in mind?
Well, if you got a sense that anybody could use it, I think I then appear to have succeeded in what I was trying to do. Because, I mean, if you look at the last decade, there have been enormous changes. There have been enormous changes in the country, but especially in foreign policy, with which I have personally been involved. So, I've really at the beginning of the book tried to explain why I wrote the book, which is, unless a person who is themselves involved in the process of change starts narrating the story and explaining it, people do not necessarily understand it. Now, when I say people, I actually mean the general public.
Yeah.
Because one of my points I make is foreign policy is important for everybody today. It's not something which people in South Bloc or or even I would say the larger political class or the people involved in diplomacy have stakes in. I've tried to bring out how the normal people, the average people have stakes. But some of it is also because what has been happening in the world. I mean, if you look at even the last 5 years, I mean, we've had COVID, we've had Afghanistan, the Taliban takeover, we've had problems on our border with China,
But in the book you don't just mention it as okay, we've had these problems. I like how it becomes relevant to me as a layperson when you talk about Vande Bharat, and how I as a layperson would be connected to foreign policy because evacuation of people, the Ganga, Operation Ganga, then you talk about several things, the COVID diplomacy. So it makes it, relatable when it comes to.
No, absolutely. Because, what I've tried to do is to say, okay, look, here is a big picture. And here is what people would normally say, very complex diplomacy. Okay, there's a MEA and a foreign service and a minister who handle, and a government which handles all of this. I have tried to show, yes, we may be doing all that, but every one of these somewhere impacts your life. That if we take a stand, let us say, on the Russia-Ukraine conflict, we have done so because we are shielding the Indian consumer from unreasonable increases in the petrol price at the pump. Or if there is a COVID challenge, we have mounted this massive mission, Vande Bharat, which actually brings back 7 million people.
Yeah, like as a mother who has a son or a daughter stuck in Ukraine, would have thought that foreign policy doesn't really matter to me till that happened.
No, and again the point I make is, look, these are no longer going to be one-off situations.
Yeah.
That there's Ukraine, there is I mean recently Operation Ajay in Israel, there's Operation Kaveri in Sudan. That because Indians are working abroad, because Indians are studying abroad, because you and I and hundreds, if not millions of families are also traveling abroad. People go as tourists. If you look at merchant shipping today, look at air crew, look at the people working in hotels, people who have jobs, blue collar jobs abroad. So we are globalizing. We need to know what those big dangers are out there. And in a sense, that's why a lot of I would say the examples and the metaphors I've used. The big dangers, sometimes all the players are not aware what it means to you, but at the end of the day, it means something to everybody personally.
Correct. And the other interesting thing that I liked in the book was the allegorical references and the metaphors that you drew from the Ramayana. Mostly when we read books about foreign policy or statecraft or national security, they derive their references and their metaphors from, say, the Mahabharata. But I found it interesting that you found lessons on statecraft, diplomacy, everything from the Ramayana, and that was very interesting because, I mean, things like what Vibhishan did or Valivad, that, you know, when it comes to statecraft, you could draw from that epic was very interesting. Why Ramayana?
Well, there's both a logic and an incident. Okay. The incident actually was when I was preoccupied writing the book. I'd gone to give a talk about my previous book. Okay. And somebody actually asked me, my recollection is it was in Pune, saying that, look, you've used Mahabharata, so, you know, have you ever thought about using Ramayana as a context, as something to draw from? And it was there somewhere at the back of my mind, but I think that incident compelled me to look at it. But there's another reason also. The other reason is, look, Ramayana, there's a difference in era, you know, even in what are norms and standards. I mean, by the time you reach Mahabharata, it's absolute realpolitik. I mean, you know, whereas I think it's important today to remind people that reputation also has a value, that it is not something, you know, which is hot air, and, you know, it's not posturing, that standards mean something, rule of law means something, norms do count. So, but even those who have a higher purpose have to practice statecraft, and those who practice statecraft must always remember the higher purpose. So, in a sense, you know, I've tried to in Ramayana really also to bring out I would say the ethical, or the, you know, are striving at the end of the day for a better world. You know, not that we win any which way and take what we get.
In the book, while reading the book, it's a bit confusing. Am I reading a book written by an academician? Am I reading a book written by a diplomat turned politician? Or am I reading a book written by a politician turned academic once again? It's like I can't figure out, like, you know, when you read a book, you want to know what the author is, who the author is, why is he looking at this prism. So what are you writing as?
I think a mixture of all of them. You know, the diplomat in me has in a sense, you can say, the domain knowledge and the experience which I talk about. The politician in me feels the need to communicate that to, as we said, to the everyday world, to the normal, you know, to the Samanya Nagrik, you can say. And in a sense, you know, look, if there are perhaps two sagas, two stories, if all of us have grown up with, this is really the Ramayana and Mahabharata, you know. And we often use so much of the metaphors and the situations and the comparisons in our normal life, you know. You know, if I were to talk to you chatting, I may bring up some reference there. So why I used that was also to remind people, look, we are a, you know, multiple sort of millennia old civilization. When we discuss the world, you know, can we think about doing it on our terms and in our, you know, in our framework, in our construct? So there was that part of it also, you know, that for me to think of the world, you know, I mean, as you can see, what I've tried to do is to take a particular theme and to try to give it a Ramayana type relevance. So say, for example, I've used the coalition building, you know, how Lord Ram very carefully constructs a coalition and what it takes to construct a coalition, you know, it doesn't happen by itself. Or even you know, in diplomacy, I mean, you've heard me say before that the two preeminent examples of diplomats are, you know, Hanuman and Shri Krishna. But there are others, you know, Angad, for example, or even his mother Tara. These are people who, in very difficult situations practice their diplomatic skills. So,
I like the Vibhishan part too.
you know, the Vibhishan part,
That was very interesting, and I wanted you to expound on that. I wanted more details because many times we think of Vibhishan as, okay, traitor from one aspect,
Sure,
but
sure.
you said that there's more to it.
well, there are two angles from which I have approached Vibhishan. One, of course, that Vibhishan itself, in a sense, is a person torn between a commitment to the right, to dharma on one side, and the fact that he is from Lanka and really, he is Ravan's brother. So that's the dilemma that he has. But I've also tried to put the other side. I mean, we always think of, when you say Vibhishan, what is he? But think of what must have been passing through Ram's mind when Vibhishan turns up.
So is it ethically or morally right what he did? And then you bring it to, I don't want to be a spoiler and explain how you bring that with today's India, but it is interesting how you draw the parallel out there.
One is the ethical, moral, but there's also this. There's a question, is Lord Rama, isn't he being smart?
Yeah.
That he is actually judged him well, partly because of Hanuman. Hanuman has given him the inputs. This allows him to make a judgment about Vibhishan, which actually is not shared by those around him. They are very suspicious of him.
Yeah.
Whereas he realizes the value of what it means to have someone like this on his side.
And also for the general good of the people. You keep saying that it's not just being moralistic in isolation, that one sees the stories from Ramayana. Everything is associated with the good of the people in mind. And I like how you bring the parallels.
Well, in today's political parlance, I would say delivery on the ground. So, if you are doing something and that doing something means effective delivery for the population, tell me what can be nobler than delivering good to people and changing their lives for the better.
I have to ask you about the title. It's Why Bharat Matters. Bharat and India interchangeable, and you come to the title of the book in the very last chapter. Yes. So usually, again, like I said, that many presumptions that one has while picking up a book written by a minister, you overturn many of that in this book. And one is that you tell us only in the last chapter why Bharat matters.
Well, again, I want people to read the other 10 chapters before getting there. But look, there's a very active debate right now. I think in many ways, obviously, people use that debate for their own narrow purposes. The fact is, to me, the term Bharat has a certain, not just a cultural, civilizational connotation, but also one of a certain confidence and identity, and and on what terms how you perceive yourself, and because that is my business, what are the terms you are offering to the world. So, I don't, this is not to me something which is a narrow political debate, or I would even say in that sense a historical cultural debate. It is a mindset, and the point I make is that if we are actually preparing seriously for the Amrit Kal, next 25 years, if we are talking of a Viksit Bharat, a developed Bharat, that can only happen if you are an Atmanirbhar Bharat.
In 2024, we complete 10 years of Prime Minister Modi being in office. You've been Ambassador, Foreign Secretary, EAM during this tenure. What have been where do you see the pivot happen in Indian foreign policy, and what were the challenges when you took over as Foreign Secretary, as EAM? What are the goals and that were given to you when you took?
Again, I have tried to bring that out in the book in an account of what I have put as a decade of transformation.
But you've not talked about it personally. That's what, it's not a memoir. That's
No,
what
it's not a memoir.
Yeah,
It's not a memoir. I mean, you can't write a memoir when you are still holding a job, you know. I have tried, I've tried to be very objective about it. You know, in a way, I'm a participant, but I'm also a person trying to deliberately take myself out and look at it.
Several prisms going on there.
I would say it was not so much that there was a turning point. I mean, unless and you can call 2014 as a turning point. Once Modi comes in 2014 and really weighs the foreign policy, which now he's taken charge of. That's essentially the chapter which I described, where you can see, he feels the need for a new construct, that one where the neighborhood, very generous, non-reciprocal policy towards a neighborhood, which brings the neighborhood in closer, to the fact that we have an extended zone.
The mandalas that you talk about.
Yes, the Southeast Asia, Indian Ocean, the Gulf, Central Asia. Now, we had made some progress definitely in Southeast Asia, but if you look, for example, at the Gulf, I mean, it was amazing. I mean, this is a region so near us, so many Indians living there, so much oil imported from there, yet politically very, very neglected. I mean, a country like UAE, for example, had not had a prime ministerial visit before Modi went there, from the time of Indira Gandhi. And then you will look at the Indian Ocean. Again, we were dealing with it like, this
piecemeal.
Island, that island, yes, piecemeal. I mean, there wasn't a single integrated construct. And again, in the case of Central Asia, that intensity of connection was not there. Then the ability really to engage multiple, the major powers. Engage not in the sense of, oh, keep us out of your problems, because that's a kind of like, I don't want to get caught in the big debates of the day. That's not what we are saying. We are saying, yes, we have stakes in the big debates of the day. I will take my call, but there's no exclusivity in any of my relationships. I reserve the right to deal with each one of you as per my national interest, and also preparing for a larger footprint, global footprint. Then the entire approach to the diaspora has undergone a change.
Absolutely. From 2014 onwards, they were suddenly in center focus, and they remain so, because initially it seemed as if there were many articles which came, op-ed articles, which said that this is just the start. As soon as Mr. Modi gets grip of the foreign policy, he's going to ignore the diaspora and get on with the leaders, but that's not happened.
Well, I think, as has been the case for the last 10 years, a lot of people who've been writing about it really have no idea what is happening.
What to expect, at least nobody knows.
Yes. So maybe by writing this book, I may be doing everybody a service, at least
by demystifying
saying, okay, here is a logic, here is a narrative. Why don't, I'm sure those who are open-minded enough to want to learn would probably find some benefit. But the other part is also, if you look at the big global issues of the day, that say, for example, climate change. We were perceived as one of the countries holding back. Today, actually, whether it is the International Solar Alliance, the Disaster Resilient Coalition, in fact, having been with Prime Minister Modi in Paris, in Glasgow, recently in Dubai, we've actually sort of taken the lead when it comes to the COP meetings. And
so I will read out a couple of quotes from the book. In one of them, you say diplomacy is about chemistry and credibility, and you keep referring to that in the book several times, about how this chemistry, especially with the Prime Minister and world leaders, how it's impactful on delivering on foreign policy. Could you tell me a little bit about how these 10 years have mattered as far as this chemistry and credibility is concerned?
I mean, look, it's not that difficult to appreciate. I mean, let's for a moment not think of the leaders. Okay, if two people have not met each other, have not spoken to each other, have not spent time with each other, how could they possibly relate to each other? I mean, it's obvious, isn't it? And yet, when you have, when we say, okay, India is growing, I mean, surely if India is growing, our interests are growing, that means we need to be much more active and much more engaging, and there must be that kind of connect, because at the end of the day, leaders do, a large part of policy making is derives from the judgment that a system, especially the system's leader, makes. Now, if I have not even spoken to you, how am I going to influence your judgment? So, if you see the last decade, to me, one great, I would say, advantage, a tailwind I have had as Foreign Secretary and now as EM, is the fact that in many countries, when you go there, the fact that the President or the Prime Minister, they know Prime Minister Modi, they admire him, they have spoken to him, they have discussed something, they have done something, this counts an enormous amount.
And the hugs and the Twitter engagement, the X engagement now, or social media. The Prime Minister embraced social media right away, and then every meeting that he's had with heads of state and government, he tweets about it. Then those people, the heads of government, they tweet about it. So this is social media has played a very large role in this chemistry and credibility business.
Yes, it has. I think also to some extent they look. I mean, there was that example which was captured by the cameras. Where President Biden is telling Prime Minister Modi, saying, whatever, you have a 70-something% approval rate, so how do you do it? So, I think other politicians, like in any competitive profession, they look to see, okay, how is the peer faring? Okay, so for them, the fact that a Prime Minister is doing well in the country, doing well could be an election result, doing well could be 7.7 growth rate, doing well could be handling COVID, doing well could be deploying 5G. So they make these judgments, but at the
if President Biden wanted this kind of rating, he could have come for the Republic Day parade. He could have got a Namaste Biden, like Namaste Trump.
No, I think that was a different issue, because we got, it was tied to the Quad also, and we couldn't get a landing zone there.
Explain what is landing zone to layman.
No, meaning we couldn't get everything agreed with everybody. So therefore it didn't work.
Okay, another quote which I found interesting was, a nationalist outlook will naturally produce a nationalist democracy. Now, is it something that, and you also say that it's something that the world will get used to. Now, this is something that many people have written about, those who have seen Indian foreign policy evolve, that there is a kind of a muscular foreign policy now. It's a nationalist foreign policy.
I would say confident, not muscular.
Okay, confident, your choice of word. Some say, like you would say confident, some would say it's bombastic at times even, because of this, the domestic policy is so nationalistic, it's reflecting on the international interactions that the Prime Minister, that the Foreign Minister and everybody else has. Have we made more friends? Have we become a Vishwamitra, or are we imposing our view on the various mandalas that you talked about, which is our neighborhood and then the East Asia area?
No, I don't think we are imposing our view, because at the end of the day in foreign relations, beyond a point you can't impose your view unless you are such a big power with such a huge margin of strength that you can, and that is not the case. I would certainly say today that if you look at the 200 odd countries, okay, if you say where is India today in their consciousness, in their awareness, I would say in the last 10 years we are very much deeper and stronger in that regard. If you say how many of them feel something has happened in India which is relevant to them, I would again say the answer is yes, those numbers have grown. We are seen as more relevant, we are more visible, we are seen as influencing many more outcomes. So, I mean, if you look at it today, many more leaders want to come to India. I mean, one of my big challenges as a foreign minister is really to explain why Prime Minister cannot visit every country in the world every year, because everybody apparently wants him to come.
I'm going to go into the trouble areas.
So,
when you talked about when we talk about,
no, this is not a trouble area. This is when you have high demand. I mean, it's in a way a welcome problem.
you have many wanting to come here.
And many wanting to come, many of them who want him to go out. So, I would certainly say today, you know, look, when we say Vishwamitra, just look, I give you the example.
Vishwamitra feels nice. Vishwaguru seems threatening to many.
I have used the word Vishwamitra, and to me, if you want to, one example of that is the G20. That at the G20, look, go back and look at it. 24 hours, not even 12 hours before the G20 declaration was finalized, there were people publicly predicting that we will fail. Okay, now I know some part of it was politically driven, put that aside. But the general expectation was, you know, relations today are so polarized on the Ukraine issue. If the concerns of the global south have become so strong and yet you know, being contested in a way or not being recognized duly by others. So, there was a north-south divide, there was a east-west polarization, different countries were pulling in different directions, and yet the fact was eventually we got everybody to come to the table. And I accept, when they all came to the table, they deserve credit. But finally, the truth is they came to the table because everybody ultimately had a relationship with India. The other 19 countries said, yes, this matters for India. This is something which is right. So, because the fact is everybody made a compromise. That is how it happened.
Yeah.
You know. So,
but that happened, and then suddenly we saw ties with Canada plummet. It happened literally within weeks.
No, but that.
What went wrong there?
That is, I think, I mean, I
it
honestly
happened
do
even
not
during
see.
the summit.
Look, I do not see a correlation there. No, I mean, getting everybody around on a G20 has nothing to do with the Khalistani issue in Canada. I mean, the Khalistani issue is not a new issue. The Khalistani issue has existed for decades.
Why do you think that it has become such a thorn in the flesh for India-Canada relations? And why do you think Prime Minister Trudeau, for a handful of Khalistanis, has put relationship with India on the rocks?
Look, I can explain my government, my Prime Minister and my book.
But you're also an academic, you're also a diplomat.
I do not, it's not for me to speculate on other Prime Ministers, but I will tell you the issue at heart. The issue at heart is the fact that in Canadian politics, these Khalistani forces have been given a lot of space and have been allowed to indulge in activities which I think are damaging to the relationship, clearly not in India's interest, but I would argue not in Canada's interest either. But unfortunately, that is the state of their politics.
How do you see the allegations that Canada makes on India with regard to deaths which have taken place, unexplained deaths which they call, and the investigations they are doing, and compare it with what the Americans and how they are reacting?
Smita, I have spoken about this before. It is not obviously subject relating to my book, and we are not here to do a press conference.
Right.
I mean, I have been quite clear on this, that if somebody gives us something to investigate, we will look at it.
Right. I will move on to, in your book you talk.
Yes, let us stay with the book.
In the book, you talk about legacy building also, and about how everything that has happened in the Modi era has worked towards a goal. In 2024, will India and China bury the hatchet? Because there is in one part you talk about relationship with France and how it has gone forward. You talk about relationship with Japan. These two stand out clearly in the Modi era, having taken an upward trajectory. The two which don't take an upward trajectory, one is China and the other one is of course Pakistan. Pakistan barely makes any mention in your book, but China. So will steps be taken in 2024 to bury the hatchet?
See, I cannot answer that because obviously as they say, it takes two hands to clap. But I pose the issue, and I pose the issue in this manner, that if you look at the last 75 plus years of our foreign policy, we've had a strain of realism about China, and we have had a strain of I can say, you can call it idealism, romanticism, non-realism, you can say. And it begins right from in a sense from day one, I mean, where there is a very sharp difference of opinion how to respond to China between Nehru and Sardar Patel. I'm giving a certain attitude here. So, I would say the Modi government and has been very much more in conformity with the strain of realism which originated from Sardar Patel. And
you mentioned the romanticism of the Nehruvian era.
Yes, yes.
Now, and then you talk about the
and
realism.
I've given some examples. I mean, where even when it came, for example, to the UN Security Council seat. Now, again, it's not my case that we should have necessarily taken the seat. That's a different debate. But to say that we should first let China, China's interests should come first. That's a very it's a very peculiar statement to make.
And you also write that there was no reciprocity in the years after that from China.
Yeah, no. So, there is a judgment here. There is first a judgment about what we should do, then there is a judgment about what you should expect. So, I think today, what will happen with China. I mean, I argue for dealing with China from a basis of realism, that strain of realism which I feel extends all the way from Sardar Patel to Narendra Modi. That is the strain of realism which I feel should allow us to have a certain approach. The alternative strain which starts from Nehru's in a sense China first policy, because he says first let China take its seat, then we will see for India.
China first.
So, from China first policy it ends up as Chindia policy.
I know,
today.
people had forgotten that horrible term, Chindia.
Well, I think
you mention it.
You should ask the inventor of the term.
Yeah, it's very cringeworthy to read it today.
But there you are.
Yeah. You've been ambassador in China. You've met with several of your predecessors who were foreign ministers. You as a foreign minister, as an external affairs minister, how do you see the pivot that India has taken with regard to China?
No, I don't think, look, I don't believe it's a pivot we have taken. We have tried to construct a relationship which is based, as I say, on three mutuals. And the fact is that unless there is a mutuality of that mutuality is recognized, this relationship will find it very difficult to progress. And today part of our problem is exactly because in 2020 agreements were disregarded, and the mutuality on which this whole relationship is predicated has not been followed, that we have the situation we have. So, when you ask me where would it go, I would say a lot of it would depend on what is the Chinese policy.
In the book you mention a number of places or times in our history where mind games have to be played by diplomats, by politicians when dealing with other countries. With China, did we always lose out on this mind games thing?
No, I don't think we always lost out, but I would argue that at various points of time, we could have, say there was, when we talk about the parts of the past which today would be very difficult for someone to understand, the Panchsheel agreement is another such example. So, I would say that today, that's why I come back to Bharat, that the role of confidence, the role of assurance, the fact, I mean, we are multiple millennia civilization, all this should be in our demeanor, in our standing, and in the way in which we approach other countries.
You confuse people because of this demeanor. Let me be honest with you. You were in Russia and you posted that picture, and then you were sitting with President Putin, and in the Western press there was an absolute meltdown that now Dr. Jaishankar is there, and then there's this bonhomie between President Putin and Prime Minister Modi. untrustworthy friend and ally. The Western media just doesn't know how to read you.
No, if people can't read me, that means my mind games are working. Okay, but the answer is, honestly, I see no reason that people should take any what was happening other than at face value, because we have always maintained that the Russia relationship is a very important one, very steady one. I have written about it in my book, and I said it in Moscow. I mean, I said it publicly in Moscow. Even before my meeting with President Putin happened, which is that we value this relationship. It is a relationship that has served India well. Look, I am looking at it now from an Indian perspective, and that is also part of being Bharat. Part of being Bharat is you must look from perspective of your interest, not allow other people to decide your judgment and your responses.
You know, when you write about the Quad and then the disappointment when the Quad had to take a back seat, and then it comes up again. Well, it comes into focus when Prime Minister Modi comes in. Again, it comes into focus. So obviously, when it's Quad, and then there is Russia, who are the new friends? Who are the old friends? Is everybody a friend? This Vishwamitra bit, I know you're going to come back to that. Is everybody a friend? How do you choose your friends and allies?
No, again, look, a country which has maximum friends and minimum adversaries is obviously one with a smart diplomacy. So, why would a country restrict its friends? Why would it say, I will choose you and not choose you, unless your interest compelled you to do that? I am today focusing on how do I expand my relationships, how am I more present, how am I more influential. So, for me, the more friends I have, the more forums I am member of, the more places where I can influence, sway outcomes is good for me. Now, it is the others who push you, this is the mind games that others play, that they would say, if you are a democracy, you must do this, this, this. So, if you should ask them, well, if that is so, please look at the mirror and tell me how you were behaving as a democracy. So, everybody, after all, look, it is not like every country has its values and beliefs, but every country has its interests as well, and every country finds a balance. So, when others come and tell you that you have no interest, that you must go by what has been decided elsewhere, that is when you lack that self-confidence to say, excuse me, I think I am going to do something else, because I have looked at it very carefully and my interests have taken me in a certain direction or asked me to take a certain position.
But that's exactly what has been happening post G20 in the foreign media. Almost on a weekly basis, one is seeing articles that this assertive India on the world stage is happening at one level, and at the other level, it is at the cost of diplomacy, democracy sliding, or democracy indicators sliding in India.
Yeah, but I've not I made some references to that democracy narrative. That is also a mind game. That is when
I think I'm regretting using that word now.
But seriously, just look at it this way. There are people who apparently feel more confident of their support outside India than inside India. They get support from outside India. So, we have this constant barrage. We have had this from 2014, it increased after 2019. I am sure it will become very shrill as we lead up to the summer of 2024, who will constantly come at you and say, you are less of a democracy, you are, they will pick what they believe are flaws or failings that we have. Again, we must have the confidence to judge it. I am not saying we are perfect. I am not saying we do not have room for improvement. Everybody does, we certainly do. But I would say, please look at their motive and their agenda. They are not agenda less, they are not motive less. They are trying to push a certain line because they have a certain interest. So, do not necessarily take what comes in the foreign media at face value. Because when you look at the kind of, shall I say, multiple standards that they practice, you are talking of the state of democracy in this country. Give me any yardstick of democracy. Are your elections fair? Is your participation growing?